Hi, hello, vanakkam, and welcome back to yet another episode on your favorite Little Slaw YouTube channel. So today in this video, we're going to see about one of the question, which is what is the difference between the HTML mode and the URL mode? And in fact, we have got, we used to get this question several times. So I wanted to create a video on that with some sample scripting, and that will help you to understand why and when should we use the HTML mode and URL mode. And in this example, in this video, I'm going to explain you with different examples, like of one for the HTML mode and one for the URL mode, so that you can very well understand how does it work. And coming back to this, the one I always want to tell you this. So if you want to watch more similar videos like this, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to give a thumbs up if you like this video, and share this video with your friends and colleagues, and give a comment if you have any questions or feedbacks in the comment section. And coming back to this original content, so what are we going to see today? So it's going to be the difference between the HTML mode and URL mode. So the same code, what you're seeing here is on the top and at the bottom. It's the same code, but one is with the HTML mode and the other one is with the URL mode. So one thing which helps you to identify that this is a HTML recording is the mode is equal to HTML. So this will actually tells you that this has been recorded using HTML, and here the mode is URL. So this has been recorded using URL mode. So telling about the first topic. So this here, the first item which you're going to see today is, the main difference, which is the context-based recording. So when I talk about context-based recording, so in HTML mode, the login process that we see here is recorded as a single context-aware action. So the script automatically handles the related resources, that is the CSS, JS, image, etc., without creating separate calls for them. So that is what we call as context-based recording. Some of the key points here are we do have the web URL on the top. We do have the web URL, which represents the action of navigating to the login page. And then we do have the web submit form, which captures the entire form submission in just one step with context dependencies handled automatically, for example, like cookies or session IDs. And also resources like images, CSS files are bundled up and handled automatically. So that is about the context based recording in terms of HTML mode. And when it comes to the the URL mode, so in the URL mode, the same login action is recorded with individual requests. Say, for example, you can see here, like individual requests for every resource on the page, including we do have CSS, we do have the images, we do have the JS files, etc. And each request is treated independently. So that's the difference. So here in URL mode, each and every request are treated independently, but in the HTML mode, the script automatically handles the related resources without creating separate calls for them. And then the next part, so each resources like the CSS, JavaScript, image is recorded as a separate request, that is the using the web URL calls. And the web submit data is used to manually specify the login action. And the context dependency, say for example the cookies and session tokens are not automatically handled, and they might require correlation. So this is all about the context based recording. And now we'll move on to the second part. So now the second item, which is how the resources are handled in HTML mode and URL mode. So again, the same code. So what happens is, like when a user navigates, say for example, when we are trying to record an application, when we try to navigate to the web page, multiple resources like images, like you see here, the images, the CSS, the JS files are loaded along with the main HTML content. So how these resources are recorded in the LoadRunner depends on the recording mode. Say for example, with the very first one, that is the HTML mode. Yes. So in HTML mode, the web URL that we see here automatically records all the associated resources within the same request, and the resource equals 0 that you see here means that this is a primary request, so the main HTML document. And LoadRunner will automatically handle resources loading implicitly during replay. So when the script runs, it actually fetches the HTML page and it loads all the resources together in the background, just like a real browser would. So what happens is we don't need to list individual resource requests, and we don't need to manually record or correlate the resources, and that's an advantage of using the HTML mode. And if the resources change, LoadRunner will still load them dynamically. But when it comes to the URL mode, that is at the bottom one, what happens is in URL mode, every single resource, such as the CSS, the image, the JavaScript files, is recorded as an individual request. So the resource equals one that you see here. So what does it mean? So the resource equal to one means the LoadRunner does not automatically fetch them when loading the main HTML page, but instead, like again during replay, each request is executed independently, which mimics how a non-browser based application would load the resources. So for example, each request can be say for example, this will be like a more detailed control, like when each request can be modified or parameterized individually, or if a resource changes or moves to a new URL, the scripts must be updated. So that's the reason, because it needs more maintenance. And the reason, if there's a change, yes, we need to update the code. And for faster execution, since LoadRunner does not wait for all resources to load automatically, this actually the URL mode will be more faster when compared to the HTML mode. And now we'll move to the third part. So now the third part, which is the user action. So what does an user action means? So a user action is something like when a user performs an action, like say for example, clicking a button or submitting a form or navigating into a page. So how LoadRunner captures the resulting request will differ in HTML and URL mode. Say for example, in HTML mode, what happens? So in the login action page that you see here, so when the user navigates to the login page, the entire page, the HTML with resources, is grouped into one request. So that's what happens when we do it using HTML mode. So they all gets grouped into one request. So for example, the form submission action here. So when the user enters the credentials and clicks login, that is captured as a single request. That's captured as a web submit form, just one single request, which represents the entire form submission. So why? So the HTML mode assumes the context of a user's action and bundles dependent resources within the same request, not as an independent request. But again, we are talking about this in every part. Like it comes as a single request. It comes as a same request. So this results in one request per user action. On the other hand, when we see about the URL mode, so what happens in the URL mode? So in the same login action, so when the user navigates to the login page, multiple requests are recorded, right? So the main HTML page is recorded as one request. The resources like CSS, the PNG, the JS are recorded as a separate request. So again, similarly, like the form submission action. So similar to HTML mode, the login form submission is recorded as one request, but it involves additional dependent requests if the resources are dynamically loaded. So why? So URL mode records every individual resource request associated with the user actions. If like independently, for example, it could be a logging or it could be a navigation. So now we'll move to the next part. And now the fourth part, which is the size of the script size. So as you can see here, even it's very evident, right? So the size of the HTML mode is comparatively smaller. Like it's just, for example, like 10 lines, hardly 10 lines, but the URL mode is like more than 15 lines. It's for a very simple action, right? So the reason is in the URL mode, the scripts, the script, each resource has a separate request. So that's the reason we do have a longer script when compared to the HTML mode. In HTML mode, they are all independent. They are all recorded in one single request, but in URL mode, they are all independent, and that's the reason we can see it has more number of lines to handle each and every single request, and they basically are recorded as a separate request. And the next part, which is the correlation effort, let me just add it here. Correlation effort. So what happens when it comes to the correlation effort? And we know always correlation plays a major role in terms of building the script, in terms of customizing the script. So again, what is the process? What is correlation? So correlation is actually the process of handling dynamic values. Like it can be a session ID, it can be a token, or it can be even any other server generated data, which changes every time a script is executed. So these values need to be captured and reused dynamically to make the script work correctly. So when it comes to HTML mode, what happens here? Why correlation effort is less in HTML mode? Yes, in HTML mode, the correlation is less effort because HTML records user actions in a high level context aware way. It automatically handles most relationships between requests, like for example a session ID or token, because the mode groups related requests like resources plus the main HTML. For example, if the login page returns a session ID that needs to be reused during submit login, LoadRunner often handles it implicitly, or it requires minimum manual intervention. And the reason is fewer requests. Yes, since HTML mode bundles resources into a single request, that is like images or CSS or JS, there are fewer places where dynamic values might appear, which reduces the need for correlation. So most dynamic values can be captured and reused in one place, for example, the web submit form. And when it comes to the URL mode, each resources, like you see, it is recorded as a separate request. So if dynamic values like session IDs or tokens are used in these resource requests, we need to manually correlate them in each individual request. For example, if a session ID is appended to the URL of style.css, we must manually capture and correlate that value, and dynamic values might appear in multiple places such as URLs, headers, or request bodies. So each occurrence must be identified and correlated individually. And unlike HTML mode, URL mode does not automatically handle dynamic relationship between each request. So we have to capture the dynamic value. For example, we can use rich save param, and we can actually reuse the captured value in all the dependent requests. And the next thing is resources. Yeah. The resources downloading during a replay. So what happens here is, even you can very evidently see here, like when we were running this request, the HTML mode request, what happens is the resources are downloaded during replay, right? Because they are not recorded here, and they will be recorded along, I mean, they'll be replayed along with the request. But on the other hand, when we were running it in the URL mode, the individual request triggers for each resource. Hence, the resource downloading is not required. But the resource downloading is required in the HTML mode. Yes, just understand. Just remember that since they always run along with the recorded request. But here, since they were handled independently, there are no more resource downloading happens until otherwise there is a change in the uh, URL, or the change in any other part, any other dependencies. They don't need to download individually every single time. Yep. And then the next part, which is the speed, I mean the execution speed. So when it comes to the execution speed, the HTML mode script is slower than URL mode script due to parsing of code. Yes, that's the reason. uh, we can say, I mean, like, even though the size of the script might be smaller, but still when it comes to execution, HTML mode is slower than the URL mode script. Again, the reason is same, because you have to download every single resources when you are running, right? So automatically there will be a delay. But when it comes to URL mode, you, I mean, like, they were automatically handled, I mean, they were handled independently, right? Again, and the connection between them are also different when it comes to the I mean, like, in terms of context base. So how well it is designed. So in HTML mode, it's quite comparatively different when it comes to the HTML mode and the URL mode, right? So all these makes a difference. So that is the reason the HTML mode is slower than the URL mode. So if you want to if you want to run your scripts faster, then in that case you have to choose URL mode. Yeah. And then the maintenance of the scripts. Yes, when we create a script, we have to use it for a long time. Like, we normally use more than like 2 years, at least one to 2 years, right? So in that case, how well the maintenance of the script, so which one does needs maintenance? So the maintenance of script is less in HTML mode. On the other hand, the URL mode script requires more maintenance and rework due to changes in the application. Yes, because all we give here are the requests, and they will take care of downloading the resources. But on the other hand, yes, URL mode needs to be changed if there are any minor or major changes in terms of the code, in terms of the URL, or in terms of the any other changes with these resources and requests, right? So that's the reason. When it comes to maintenance, yes, HTML mode has less maintenance, and URL mode has a higher maintenance when compared to the HTML mode. And then the next part, which is the um support. So HTML mode supports explicit URL. Yes, as you see here, whereas URL mode does not support the explicit HTML. So when I say explicit support and non-explicit support, so um, in HTML mode, actually they support explicit URL because it works with a specific user action and full page context, right? So for example, in this below URL, so in this below example, we have this web URL explicitly uses the URL of the login page, right, as the main request. But on the other hand, I mean, like again, when it comes to the login part, so the example.com/login is explicitly specified, and the mode automatically handles all the resources like the CSS, JS image related to this page. But on the other hand, when it comes to the URL mode that you see here, that does not support explicit HTML because it works by recording individual requests, right? So when it comes to the login part, it actually records the other individual requests like the CSS, the image, the JS. Instead of recording the full page request, each resources is handled separately as we are seeing here. So that is the reason between explicitly handling and not explicitly handling in the in terms of the HTML, in terms of the resources. And then finally, HTML mode is used for browser-based applications. This is one of the questions that one of our customer subscriber had asked, like why or where can we use it? Where can we use HTML versus URL? Yep. HTML mode can be used for mainly for browser-based applications based on the maintenance, based on the length, based on the size of the script. So considering all these factors, HTML mode is mainly preferred for browser-based applications, but URL-based are used for non-browser. That is, we normally call it as the thick client applications, right? So we can use it for the thick client applications. So that's the difference between where do we use. So HTML, yes, as you can see, they can be used for browser-based applications, and URL mode can be used for the non-browser based, or like, yes, mainly like for the client applications. So when I talk about browser-based and non-browser based, so HTML mode is ideal for applications accessed via web browsers, which involves HTML content, dynamic resources, because it records higher level user actions like clicking buttons or filling forms and bundling all the related requests. Say, for example, you can use it for a e-commerce website, because when you are recording it, you want to record a user logging in and searching for a product for an e-commerce website like Amazon or Flipkart or any other e-commerce. Mainly why HTML mode is used. So the application is browser based and they rely on HTML content. So all the resources, the related resources are automatically handled. But on the other hand, when it comes to the URL mode, it is used for applications that do not operate through a browser. So, but rather through custom built clients or desktop applications. Say, for example, it can be a banking software and ERP system, because URL mode records individual HTTP requests made by the application. And for example, if you want to record a user performing transaction in a banking application like a core banking system or an SAP client, yes, you can very well use the URL based URL mode. And the thick client applications directly send the individual HTTP or HTTPS request to the server, right? So, and these applications do not render HTML content or use browsers to display pages. So this is again just a recommendation. So that doesn't mean that I'm not stopping you. You are always welcome to do it, but again, it depends on all these factors: the maintenance of the scripts, the execution of the speed, the resources downloading during replay, the correlation effort, the script size, the user actions, the resources handling, the context-based recording. So consider all these aspects. You can choose which one best suits your needs, right? Yep. So with that, I come to an end of this video. So until I meet you in our next video, it's bye bye from us. I'm Muhammad, your favorite little star YouTube channel. Take care and bye bye.